Awesome. Thank you, everyone, for coming today, and thank you to Jake. I'm excited for this because two Michiganders, wonderful Michigan company as well, getting together, talking about logistics, and I'm really excited because in this particular offering, especially from GFS, we're going to get into, I think, the unique way that you are handling your supply chain, and I'd like to start with your background because I think that'll get us into that unique offering as well.
Yeah, absolutely. First of all, thank you to FreightWaves for having me here. It's great to get to know you a little bit better. But yeah, so Jake Benedict, I'm with Gordon Food Service. If you're not super familiar with Gordon Food Service, we are a large, privately held, family-operated food service distributor. Servicing restaurants, hospitals, hotels, and many, many others across North America. And I currently get to serve as our North American Director of Logistics. But a little bit of background on my career and my experiences at GFS. I just celebrated 15 years of service with the company. And when I joined the company, we already had a pretty well-established inbound logistics freight team and actually company called Capstone Logistics Services.
Yeah.
And at that time, Capstone was providing reliable service to our distribution centers in the U.S. They were helping the organization better understand the freight costs built into our total cost of goods, and ultimately helping the company reduce our freight spend.
Yeah.
And so the value proposition was super strong. And so I think leadership at the time said, this is great, let's do this in Canada. And that's where I got to jump in. I had the really cool, unique opportunity to be part of the Capstone Canada startup, the second logistics company for GFS. What a cool experience. I was part of the group of maybe 4 or 5 people that had the chance to start Capstone Canada. And at that time, I was 22 years old, almost fresh out of college, with a finance education, knew nothing about freight, right? I had no idea what LTL was, what a fuel surcharge was. I certainly didn't know what a lumper was. But the business started to take off, and as it did, I had the chance to play almost every role, right? Like I processed the carrier invoice, I got to tender loads, I did the check calling, I got to do some reporting, I got to do carrier development, I got to do carrier RFPs. One thing I'm probably the most proud of is we got to build some consolidation programs.
Yeah.
And just through that entire experience, created this interest in supply chain and logistics, and haven't looked back.
Yeah, yeah. I do want to say, and I want to get into Capstone a little bit more, but it's interesting to see you with this more of a data, financial, numbers background coming into this industry, and I think that's led to really what we're going to get into in this discussion. Now, when it comes to Capstone, why start that Canadian piece in particular? Well, why not have that in the original? What needed to change in order to service Canada too?
Yeah, so I think the value proposition that the U.S. was creating was really around cost and service. But the Canadian marketplace is just very different, at least for GFS at the time.
Yeah.
In the U.S., there was a much larger percentage of the overall volume was full truckload, point A to point B. In Canada, a lot of our volume was LTL, and so the value we could create was more around building the consolidation programs, using intermodal more because the distance between the major markets was significantly further. So I think part of it was different divisions, internal customers that we had to serve, different external vendors we had to support, and then the volume was just very different.
Yeah. Now, I want to get into how GFS is leveraging Capstone in particular. Like, what pushed the company, right, to say, let's bring this in-house and leverage this expertise as well, and how you're looking to advance that in the future?
Yeah. As I look forward, I think there's a few different opportunities to further leverage Capstone. GFS through Capstone manages the majority of our inbound volume already, but there's still a lot of opportunity out there for us to partner with our vendors and to convert volume from vendor managed or prepaid to GFS controlled.
Yeah.
So that would be one, and we want to do that for the reliability, the better understanding our cost structure, that type of thing. But the other big opportunity is we manage some non-GFS volume today,
Yeah.
but I think we have the expertise, the experience on the team to really grow our external non-GFS portfolio more intentionally, more aggressively. Historically, that business would come about because someone on a Friday night needed help at the last second. They had my cell phone number. We made a miracle happen, and then they asked me if I wanted it again next week.
Yeah.
So I think there's opportunity to be more intentional about growing our non-GFS portfolio.
Interesting. No, a big part of this, right, is the data strategy behind this. And again, love that you're a numbers guy because I think that helps with this as well. Can you speak on the market dynamics in particular and what you learned through Capstone and the network of GFS as well?
Yeah, with the market data, an analogy we use a lot at GFS, or at least I use it a lot, is we're driving in a car and we're in the driver's seat, and we've historically looked through the rear view mirror a lot to see what did happen, what has happened, to inform what we're going to do going forward.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of companies do that, and we still do it a lot.
Yeah.
But what we're trying to do more and more is we're trying to look through the windshield at what's currently happening and what we think is going to be happening, and developing solutions based on the windshield.
Yes.
And the couple examples I'll give you is we've never looked at the truck purchases as much as we do today, the tender rejection rates, the supply and demand and capacity, all to inform our strategy, versus looking in the rearview mirror, we'd be waiting for service to dip, or carriers to start asking for increases, things like that. So I think we're looking through the windshield more often, and I think there's still an opportunity to do that more.
Yeah, I'm interested in those opportunities to do more. Like, where do you see GFS's supply chain strategy changing now that you have kind of these unique data in front of you that can give you this like future look into the industry?
Yeah, so I think some of it comes down to leaning into some of the things that we're already doing.
Yeah.
But just taking it to the next level. I've talked a lot about the last couple of days here around some of the great information from FreightWaves and like the compliance curve that was talked about. I'm very interested in that and to see, can we quantify the trade-offs of our decisions?
Yeah.
Right? Like,
Interesting. Yeah.
like, what is the value associated with paying more, right?
True, yeah.
Or the trade-off of paying less, and when that becomes a net negative.
Yeah.
So that compliance curve, I am very interested in that.
Yeah, it's like a way to, of course, see what different value it brings and the type of decision you make as well. Now, I'm interested in the relationships with your carriers in particular, right? Because I think it's having Capstone, you get a unique look into that more than I think a lot of shippers out there as well. How has the data helped you kind of strategize that? I mean, you touched on it just a little bit there, but even as you started growing Capstone and even the Canadian unit as well, how has it changed your relationship with carriers?
Yeah, it's ironic. I think the data is actually creating more collaborative, deeper conversations with our carrier partners. And we partner with several hundred in the US and several hundred in Canada, full truckload, LTL, intermodal. And I think that data really grounds the conversation at the right point and allows us to get deeper and deeper at the inefficiencies we may be creating for that carrier that create us off that benchmark, right?
Yeah.
Or the inefficiencies that are just hidden between the two networks, between our network and the carrier's network. and you start to reconcile our reality with the data, and you start to pinpoint where the waste is.
Yeah.
And it just, to me, it forces really cool, deeper conversation.
Well, 2 segments ago, we just went through our shipper of choice, right? And it's, I mean, for all those out there working logistic providers or carriers as well, to hear a very large shipper say, like, maybe we should look internally at how we're doing things, and can be huge.
Well, I'd even say like that as the data, as we all collectively use the data more, I think it's going to put more pressure on shippers like GFS to be efficient and help eliminate that waste, right? So that is one of the things that we're investing in, is things like drop lots and things like that to try to help eliminate that waste. But yeah, it's going to be that data is very, very much a two-way street, right? And it's a great way to start a conversation. It's usually not where it ends.
Yeah, it's a good conversation starter in particular. And I think as well, happy to see that kind of internal look from a shipper perspective of ways to, I'm sure, get carriers in and out, what facilities, right? It might be performing, maybe unloading and loading a little bit slower than they should. Moving forward, looking futuristically at not just in general the industry, what excites you about maybe where the data in particular is going, and how it can be used just overall in the industry as well?
Yeah, that's a big question.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we heard a lot, the last 2 days.
Yeah.
I think AI obviously it was going to play a huge piece. And I think within that, I would say like the predictive analytics is going to get better and better. Like it'll be interesting to see how good we get at predicting traffic, and how we get good at predicting the weather events. That all can help us more dynamically route, our loads, or dynamically price our loads. So I think in the great debate, we talked a lot about the volatility and how quickly that volatility happens. I agree. I think we're going to see it be more volatile as a result of how dynamic we can be.
Well, I want to touch on that because in our first conversation with each other, getting prepared for this chat, you're speaking on that dynamic pricing environment, and for a second I said, this is actually something we're talking about a lot here at FreightWaves, and this index pricing as well in the future. Can you touch on that a little bit more, and maybe where you see the pricing and negotiation with your carriers going, having that, of course, past look of where markets are, but being able to forecast now with analytics too?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I'm not sure I have a great answer. I think it's going to be an evolution. I think it's going to, I think our partners are going to help inform what that can look like and help develop solutions with us in terms of how dynamic the pricing is, and probably depends on the specifics of the lane, right?
Sure.
So I think I would lean into our carrier relationships and better understand what makes sense for them and tailor solutions based on that.
Yeah, I like that. We'll have a couple minutes here for our audience, and just again, kind of such a forward-thinking shipper as well, and focus on that data behind it. Any advice that you give to those leading supply chain initiatives and how they can create the environment within their company to start looking at data and actually using it in their decision making as well? Whether that's how hiring or even looking at vendors and partners.
Yeah, I think one thing I've learned through implementing change, whether it's using sonar data or real-time track and trace data, it always takes longer than you think to have adoption and to get true meaningful value from it. So I think part of it is you need to be patient, but extremely persistent on getting the team to buy in, getting the team to see value in it, and letting them kind of own it. And I'll give you the example of the real-time track and trace. It took an incredible amount of effort over the last 3, 4, 5 years to get it off the ground, but I cannot be more proud now 3, 4, 5 years later, how we're using that data to drive value. But if you would have asked me when we started, I would not have said it would have taken 3 or 4 years to get here.
Yeah.
But I'm really proud we took the time and energy to do it.
And it's paid off, it sounds like, as well. Well, I appreciate your time here, and I think it's, for everyone in the audience, leaves them with some ways to, of course, strategize their own. And again, thank you so much for joining us and teach us a little bit more about Big Shipper as well.
Yeah, thanks again for having me.
No problem. Thank you, everyone, and we'll be back here in a second.